My ex-husband thought he could get away with anything. He lied to the CRA, stole money from me, and abandoned his own kids. For 2 long years, I've lived in a constant state of panic, always waiting for the next devastating blow. But today, you're going to hear how I made him regret every single move he ever made against me. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, the crushing weight of injustice, or the need to take back what's rightfully yours, hit that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss how I finally turned the tables in one of the most satisfying revenge stories you'll ever hear. It started in April 2022. I still remember it so clearly, like a scar burned into my memory. It was Easter Sunday. The kids had just finished running around the yard, giggling with chocolate on their faces, plastic eggs clutched in their hands. I was in the kitchen, basting the ham, feeling normal, content even. The kind of day where you think, maybe life isn't perfect, but it's good enough. And then, out of nowhere, he looked at me across the table. The kids were still laughing in the background, the TV playing faintly in the other room. And with the calmest, coldest voice, he said, "We need to think about a divorce." There was no fight, no screaming match, no build-up, just those words, like a grenade tossed into the middle of our quiet little holiday. I remember my fork slipping out of my hand and clattering against the plate. My heart dropped into my stomach. I laughed at first, thinking he was joking, because who says that in the middle of Easter dinner? But his face was stuck, and that's when the panic started creeping in. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my skin prickling, like my body already knew this was the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. My mind went racing in circles. Had I done something wrong? Was there someone else? Why now? I wanted to ask a million questions, but the words got stuck in my throat. It wasn't just that he wanted a divorce. It was the way he said it, like he'd already made the decision months ago, and he was just waiting for the right moment to drop the bomb. And the cruelest part? He chose a holiday, a family holiday, as if to make sure that memory would always be poisoned for me. 2 months later, everything changed, and I mean everything. It wasn't me who discovered it directly, it was my son. He came home one evening, just talking casually, like kids do, telling me about their night. He said, "Mom, it was kind of weird. Dad picked up a lady in the Walmart parking lot before he took us to youth group." At first, I froze. My brain couldn't even process the words. A lady? Walmart? My stomach knotted, and I forced myself to smile at him, pretending it was nothing, just so I wouldn't scare him. But inside, I felt my chest tightening, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat at the edge of my bed in the dark, replaying his words over and over in my head. My hands were shaking. My throat burned from trying not to cry too loud. Every part of me wanted to deny it, to believe my son was just mistaken. But deep down, my gut already knew. So I confronted Mark. I remember the way he stood there, arms crossed, leaning back, trying to look calm, almost bored. I asked him straight, "Who is she?" He laughed at first, and said I was imagining things. But the more I pressed, the more his mask started to slip. His voice got sharper, his face turned red, and suddenly he wasn't denying it so much as twisting it, trying to make me feel crazy for even asking. But then, he cracked. The truth spilled out. He admitted it. He'd been cheating on me. Not for a week, not a month, but for months. And in that moment, my heart shattered. I could actually feel it breaking. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. The man who swore he loved me, who swore he was committed to our family, had been sneaking around with another woman while holding my children's hands in church. I stood there, numb. My ears were ringing, my hands cold. And all I could think was, how long has he been lying to me? How many nights did I sit here alone while he was with her? The worst part? He looked at me like I was the problem, like he was the victim. That was the moment I realized, this wasn't the man I thought I married. This was someone else entirely, a stranger wearing the face of my husband. I kicked him out, and the very next day, he moved in with her. Just like that. No remorse, no apology, just gone. But that was only the beginning of the nightmare he dragged me into. You'd think the cheating, the lies, and the betrayal were enough damage for one lifetime. But no, Mark wasn't finished, not even close. Over the next year, things spiraled into something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. He decided that if he couldn't control me emotionally anymore, he would destroy me financially. He lied to the CRA, Canada's tax agency, flat out lied. He told them he had our kids full-time, which was absolutely not true. But the CRA believed him. And because of that lie, I got hit with a notice saying I owed $40,000. $40,000. I remember opening that letter in the mail, standing in my kitchen with a cup of coffee. I scanned the words once, then twice, my eyes blurring. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake, like maybe a typo, but no, it was real. My hands started shaking so badly I spilled coffee all over the counter. My knees went weak. Do you know what it feels like to realize that the person who once promised to love and protect you is now actively trying to destroy you? It's like drowning while the very person who's supposed to throw you a lifeline is the one holding your head under the water. And the worst part? Because of his lies, they didn't just slap me with debt. They cut off my child benefits completely. Every bit of financial support that helped me keep food on the table and clothes on my kids' backs, gone. Just like that. I was left scrambling, panicking, juggling bills, skipping meals, trying to stretch every dollar until it screamed. Nights where I sat at the kitchen table with my head in my hands, wondering how I was going to tell my kids, sorry, we can't afford this anymore. Mark knew what he'd done, and he didn't care. Not about me, not about the kids, not about the roof over their heads or the food in their stomachs. All he cared about was one thing, making my life hell, one calculated move at a time. That's when it hit me. If I didn't fight back, I would lose everything. This wasn't just about money anymore. This wasn't just about a marriage that had already rotted away. This was about dignity, about survival, about my children, being treated like pawns in his sick, twisted game of control and spite. I wasn't going to let him reduce us to victims of his selfishness. Not anymore. I made a promise to myself that day. I would fight. I would claw my way through every ounce of legal red tape, every manipulative lie, every sleepless night, until he was held accountable. And the whole time, while we were struggling, while I was holding everything together with duct tape and prayers, Mark was flaunting his shiny new life, remarried within weeks of our divorce. Weeks. Like our entire marriage had meant nothing. Like he'd just been waiting for the paperwork to clear so he could swap me out like an old appliance. And not long after that, they had a baby. A brand new family. Meanwhile, my youngest son hadn't seen his dad in over a year. Do you know what that does to a child? He begged for one-on-one time, just to have a sliver of his dad's attention. And you know what Mark told him? That it wouldn't be fair to the other kids. Fair? What's fair about abandoning your own son? What's fair about pretending he doesn't exist just because you've got a new toy to play house with? Number. I saw it clearly for the first time. Mark wasn't a father anymore. He wasn't even trying. He was too busy parading around his new family, cramming 6 kids into a 3-bedroom house, like some kind of chaotic zoo. And if I didn't step in, if I didn't take control of this situation, my kids, my flesh and blood, would pay the price forever. That was my breaking point. That was the moment the fear turned into fire. I knew then I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for them. The fear eventually burned itself out, and in its place came clarity. So I started planning. First, I went back to the business we had built together with years of sweat, late nights, and sacrifices. The business that was supposed to be my safety net after everything fell apart. And what did Mark do? He was supposed to buy me out, monthly payments that were clearly spelled out in black and white. And sure, for the first few months, the money came through. But then it stopped completely. I checked the dates, counted the months. Over a year had gone by with nothing. No explanation, no apologies, no attempt to even fake compliance. Just silence. That was a clear breach of our agreement. And in the legal world, breaches have consequences. The realization hit me like a shot of adrenaline. This was my leverage. This was my opening. So I reached out to a lawyer. A good one, the kind who doesn't flinch at messy cases like mine. I remember sitting in her office, the smell of coffee and paper heavy in the air, my hands clutching a folder stuffed with every scrap of evidence I had collected. My heart was pounding, but for the first time in months, it wasn't from fear. It was from resolve. Together we built a case, brick by brick. I gathered everything. The text messages where he admitted to things without realizing it. The bank statements that didn't match his lies. The receipts that proved I'd been the one covering medical expenses he was supposed to pay. The proof he'd given the CRA false information. The financial records showing the buyout payments had stopped cold. It wasn't just a pile of papers. It was a weapon. A carefully sharpened sword, forged from his own arrogance and carelessness. I wasn't just going to win in court. No, that wasn't enough anymore. I was going to make sure Mark never walked away from this without feeling the full weight of every single lie, every betrayal, every sleepless night he had ever caused me. I wanted him to sit there in front of a judge, stripped of his smug smile, and realize that all the games he had played, the cheating, the financial sabotage, the neglect of his own children, were finally crashing down on him. And this time, he couldn't lie his way out. He couldn't bully me into silence. He couldn't hide behind his new wife or his fake image of being the perfect dad. This time, I had him cornered. The nights were the hardest. That's when everything I'd been holding together during the day would unravel. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house pressing down on me like a weight. The glow of the alarm clock was the only light in the room, its numbers creeping forward minute by minute, mocking me with every sleepless hour. I'd close my eyes, desperate for rest, but that's when the anxiety crept in. My chest would tighten, like an invisible hand was squeezing the air out of my lungs. My thoughts wouldn't stop, questions chasing each other in circles. What if the judge doesn't believe me? What if he wins? What if I lose everything I've fought for? Sometimes I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the sheets tangled around me, my heart racing like I'd just run a marathon. I'd sit up, press my palms into my eyes, and tell myself to breathe, to just breathe. But it always felt like the ground could collapse at any second. But then, I'd think of my kids. I'd picture their faces, the way my youngest looked at me when he asked why his dad wouldn't spend time with him, the way my older two pretended to be strong, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. And I'd remind myself, this isn't about me. This is about them. That thought, those three little faces, were the anchor that kept me from breaking completely. They were the reason I picked myself up every morning, no matter how little I slept. They were why I couldn't let this go, no matter how scared I was. And when that court date finally came in January, I was ready. I walked into that courtroom with my folder thick with evidence, my lawyer by my side, and my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But this time, I wasn't shaking from fear. I wasn't the broken, humiliated version of myself he had left behind. I had every document, every receipt, every text message. I had the truth. And most importantly, I had something he never expected me to have, a voice. I sat across from Mark in that courtroom. He came in wearing that same smug expression I knew too well, the one that said he believed he was untouchable. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes darting around like he owned the room. He thought, as always, he could talk his way out of this. But this time was different. When the judge gave me the floor, I stood. My legs trembled at first, but I forced myself to plant them firmly, like roots digging into the ground. And then I spoke. I told the judge everything. Every betrayal, every lie. How he lied to the CRA and left me drowning in debt. How he ignored child support, refused to pay for his son's medical care. How he broke our business agreement. I laid out the receipts, the statements, the evidence. Piece by piece, I built the story he could no longer deny. And the more I spoke, the more Mark's smirk began to fade. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. That confidence he always carried like armor started to crack right in front of me. For once, he had no control. And then the gavel hit. The judge ruled in my favor. Full custody of my youngest son, mine. Every cent Mark owed me, ordered to be paid. The lies, the games, the smug manipulation, obliterated in the cold, sharp words of the court's decision. I looked across at him in that moment and saw it. Shock, anger, regret. The same man who thought he could ruin me was now staring at me like I had become his worst nightmare. Sometimes justice doesn't come easy. Sometimes you have to fight for it, claw through every obstacle, and refuse to give up, no matter how broken you feel. Mark may have thought he could walk away from all this untouched, but what he didn't realize is that life always has a way of balancing the scales. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen or experienced? And don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, there are plenty more stories like this, and you don't want to miss them.